Before the story begins, some love stories don't arrive in a rush. They knock quietly, long after you've built a peaceful life and convinced yourself you no longer need anything more. This is a story about calm mornings, second chances, and a woman who learned that choosing love doesn't mean losing herself. If you enjoy slow burn romance, gentle storytelling, and emotionally comforting stories, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future love stories like this one. Your support truly means everything. Now settle in. The story begins. At 35, Clara Morrison had learned how to listen to silence. Not the heavy kind that pressed against the chest, but the gentle, lived-in quiet that settled into a home and made itself useful. The kind that existed between the ticking of the clock and the distant sound of waves reaching the shore. The kind that didn't ask questions. Her mornings began before the sun had fully risen, when the world still belonged to those who moved slowly. Clara liked that hour best. She wrapped herself in a soft cardigan, padded barefoot across the hardwood floors of her small coastal house, and brewed coffee while the sky outside shifted from deep blue to pale gray. The house wasn't large, but it was hers. She had chosen it 6 years ago, at the end of a season that had left her tired in ways sleep couldn't fix. Back then she hadn't been looking for beauty or promise, only quiet. Briarwood Bay had offered that without asking her to explain why she needed it. From the kitchen window, Clara watched the ocean breathe in long, steady rhythms. Fishing boats drifted farther out as the day approached, gulls circling lazily above them. Everything moved at a pace she could match. Her life now was simple, purposefully so. She worked remotely as a content editor for a small publishing firm, shaping other people's stories while leaving her own largely unspoken. She volunteered at the local library on Wednesdays, baked bread that rarely turned out perfect, and took long evening walks along the shore when the air cooled and the town softened. People here knew her enough to wave, to ask how she was doing, to trust her quiet presence. But they didn't press. Briarwood Bay respected personal rhythms. That was why she stayed. There had been a time when Clara thought life was meant to be loud, meant to demand everything at once: ambition, love, certainty. She had lived in crowded cities where the nights were brighter than the stars, and rest always felt postponed. She had loved deeply, recklessly once. She didn't think about that love very often anymore. Not because it still hurt, but because it no longer needed her attention to survive. It had faded gently, without cruelty or betrayal. Just two people growing in different directions until their hands no longer reached naturally for each other. The memory lingered sometimes, like a song she recognized but no longer played. After breakfast, Clara settled into her workspace near the front window. Light filtered in slowly, dust drifting through it like tiny floating thoughts. She reviewed edits, sent notes, and lost herself in the quiet focus that steadied her. By mid-morning, the town was fully awake. She stepped outside to collect her mail, the breeze lifting stray strands of her hair. Across the street, Mrs. Calder watered her flower bed and smiled. "You're up early as always," she called. "Habit," Clara replied kindly. "It suits you," the older woman said, as if that alone explained something important. Clara smiled and continued down the path toward the library, her tote bag swinging lightly against her hip. The building sat near the center of town, modest but welcoming, its windows filled with sun and carefully arranged displays. Inside, the familiar sense of paper and polish greeted her. She moved through the shelves easily, straightening books, exchanging quiet greetings. Here too she fit without effort. Later, while shelving returns, she overheard a conversation at the front desk. "They finally approved the marina renovation," someone said. "Supposedly the architect knows the town well. Grew up here." "That explains the design," another replied. "Feels respectful, like someone who remembers." Clara paused only briefly, sliding a book into place. She didn't ask questions. Curiosity had its place, but she had learned that not everything new needed her attention. The marina had been slowly deteriorating for years. A change there was practical, not personal. And yet, as the day passed, a subtle restlessness followed her. It appeared in small ways. She reread the same paragraph twice. Let the kettle whistle longer than usual. Stood at the edge of the beach that evening without stepping into the sand. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky with soft gold and lavender, Clara walked along the shoreline. Her boots pressed gentle impressions into the damp sand, the water cool against her ankles. She breathed deeply, letting the evening wrap around her. This was the life she had chosen, one of calm intention, of peace earned not borrowed, of being whole without asking another person to complete the sentence. And she was content. Mostly. Later at home, she lit a lamp instead of the overhead light, letting shadows soften the corners of the room. She cooked a small dinner for herself and ate slowly, savoring the quiet. As night settled, she curled onto the sofa with a book she had already read once before. Comfort lived in familiarity. Still, when she finally set the book aside and stared out the window at the darkened street, a thought surfaced uninvited. What if calm was not the end of the story? The idea didn't frighten her. It simply existed, hovering without urgency. She had learned not to chase thoughts like that. If they belonged, they would stay. Clara turned off the lamp and prepared for bed, the sound of the ocean drifting through the open window. The house exhaled into sleep around her. Briarwood Bay was quiet, and somewhere within that stillness, something old, patient and unfinished, rested just beyond the edge of her carefully built peace, waiting for the right moment to be remembered. Clara did not go to the marina looking for memories. She went because the library committee needed volunteers to help coordinate the reopening weekend, and someone had to deliver printed schedules to the project manager. Clara volunteered before she could think too hard about it. Habit again. Reliability. Safe things. The morning air was crisp, the kind that carried the promise of warmth later in the day. Construction sounds had become part of the town's background lately, measured, purposeful. Clara walked along the familiar path, tote bag tucked under her arm, her steps unhurried. The marina looked different already. Fresh wood gleamed where weathered boards once sagged. The docks were sturdier, cleaner, but still unmistakably Briarwood Bay. Whoever had designed it had understood restraint. It wasn't trying to be something else. She appreciated that. A temporary office stood near the edge of the water, its door propped open. Clara adjusted the strap of her bag and stepped forward, rehearsing her polite introduction in her mind. She knocked lightly. "Come in," a man's voice called. The sound of it stopped her cold. Not because it was loud or unfamiliar, but because it was known in a way that bypassed logic entirely. Clara opened the door slowly. He stood behind a folding desk cluttered with blueprints, sunlight catching on dark hair that was just slightly touched with gray at the temples. Taller than she remembered, perhaps. Or maybe memory had softened him over time. His sleeves were rolled to his forearms, hands resting casually on the edge of the desk as he looked up. Their eyes met. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Time didn't collapse. It didn't rewind. Simply stretched. "Clara," he said quietly. Her name sounded different in his voice than it did anywhere else, as if it belonged to a version of her that existed outside the years between. "Ethan," she replied, steady despite the sudden tightness in her chest. Ethan Walker. The love she had once trusted with all the parts of herself she hadn't yet learned to guard. He smiled, not wide, not tentative, but real. Recognition softened his features, and something like relief passed through his expression. "I didn't know you lived here," he said. "Neither did I," she answered honestly, then added, "Not until I did." The faint laugh that escaped him felt achingly familiar. "I'm guessing you're not here by coincidence," Ethan said, gesturing at her tote. "Library schedules," she replied, lifting the papers slightly. "For the reopening weekend." "Right. Of course." He moved around the desk, taking the papers from her with care, as though anything abrupt might undo the moment. "I should have known you'd be involved in something like that." She resisted the urge to point out that he barely knew her anymore. "Looks like you're leading the project," Clara said instead, glancing at the plans pinned behind him. "I am," he nodded. "I came back for this. For here." He paused, then added more quietly, "For home." The word settled between them, heavier than it had any right to be. Clara nodded once. "The town appreciates it." Silence followed, not awkward but charged. Outside, a gull cried overhead. Somewhere nearby, a hammer struck wood in steady rhythm. "So," Ethan said finally, leaning casually against the desk, "how long have you been here?" 6 years. His brows lifted slightly. 6. He shook his head, smiling faintly. I left for almost that long. Funny how timing works. She thought of all the mornings she'd watched the ocean alone. All the nights she'd gone to bed content but untouched. Timing felt less funny than it did precise. How have you been? He asked. The question was simple but real. I'm well, she said after a moment. Better than I used to be. Something unreadable crossed his face. I'm glad. He glanced at the papers again, then back at her. Would you like to walk the docks with me? I can show you what we've planned. She hesitated. 6 years ago, she might have said yes without thinking. Now she considered the calm she had built, the careful balance she protected. She also considered the way his voice still carried familiarity without presumption. All right, she said. But just a short walk. They stepped outside together, the sunlight brighter than it had been moments before. Ethan walked beside her, matching her pace naturally. He always had been good at that. As they walked, he explained the design choices, where benches would go, how the lights were positioned to preserve the night sky, why certain materials were chosen for durability instead of flash. Clara listened, genuinely impressed. You thought about how people would use it, she said. I remembered how they already did, he replied. I didn't want to erase that. Something in her softened. At the far end of the dock they stopped. Water lapped gently against the posts, reflecting the sky in slow, broken patterns. This was always your favorite spot, Ethan said quietly. Clara turned to him. You remember that? I remember a lot of things, he answered. More than I expected. Their eyes held, the moment stretching, but this time Clara felt grounded rather than swept away. I have a good life here, she said carefully. A quiet one. I can see that, Ethan replied. I'm not here to disrupt it. She believed him. That unsettled her more than doubt would have. As they walked back toward the office, Clara felt something shift. Not dramatically, not urgently. Just enough to register. At the door Ethan stopped. Would it be okay? He began, then paused, choosing his words. If I invited you to coffee sometime? Just to talk. No expectations. She studied his face. Not the memory of it, but the man as he was now. The steadiness. The patience. I don't know, she said honestly. He nodded without disappointment. That's fair. Then she added, but I'll think about it. His smile was quiet, grateful. That's more than enough. Clara walked home alone, her steps slower than usual. Everything in her life was still intact. The routines, the quiet, the peace. And yet, the past hadn't arrived like a storm. It hadn't demanded entry. It had knocked gently. And for the first time in a long while, Clara didn't ignore the sound. Ethan didn't call that afternoon or the next day. Clara noticed, only because part of her expected him to, but the absence felt intentional rather than neglectful. It was respectful, thoughtful, exactly the kind of space she now required. 2 days later, she received a message while she was reorganizing the fiction section at the library. I hope this isn't intrusive. If you'd ever like to get coffee, I know a small place by the water. No assumptions. Just conversation. Clara read it twice, then once more slowly. There was no rush in his words, no urgency disguised as charm. He wasn't reaching backward. He was waiting, hands open. She replied a half hour later. Coffee would be fine. Tomorrow morning works. His response came after a few minutes. I'll meet you there. Thank you for trusting me with that. She set her phone down and returned to work, but something warm settled in her chest. Not excitement, not fear. Intention. The cafe overlooked the bay. Its large windows fogged slightly in the early morning chill. Clara arrived first, choosing a seat near the window. She liked to arrive places early. It gave her time to feel anchored. Ethan arrived exactly on time. He wore a soft sweater instead of a jacket, his hair still slightly damp as if he'd just come from the sea air. When he spotted her, he smiled, not wide, not cautious, just familiar enough. They exchanged greetings, ordered coffee, and sat. At first, they spoke about nothing that carried weight. Library events. The slow pace of the town. The cafe's stubborn refusal to replace its mismatched chairs. Felt easy. Disarmingly so. Only when the cups were half empty did Ethan lean back slightly, studying her face. You seem settled, he said. I don't think I ever saw you like this before. Clara considered that. I wasn't. He nodded, accepting the truth without pushing. Neither was I. They spoke then carefully. About the years apart. The choices they'd made. The ambition that once pulled them in opposite directions. Not to reopen wounds, but to acknowledge where scar tissue had formed. I thought leaving was the only way, Ethan admitted. I didn't know how to ask you to wait without resenting you. You weren't wrong, Clara said quietly. I didn't know how to follow you without losing myself. They let that stand. Outside, the tide shifted slowly, the water glinting beneath muted sunlight. The world continued, indifferent but steady. After coffee, they walked along the shore. Their arms brushed occasionally. Once, Ethan instinctively reached to steady her when her boot slipped on wet sand, his hand warm and sure around her wrist. The touch lingered a moment longer than required. He didn't pull her closer. She didn't step away. Thank you, she said softly. For the coffee? He asked gently. For the patience. That was when something changed, not dramatically but decisively. The tension lost its edge and became anticipation instead. They began to see each other after that, but never too often. A walk here. A shared meal there. Each meeting felt chosen rather than assumed. Trust grew in small, deliberate ways. Ethan remembered her boundaries without being reminded. Clara noticed the ways he stayed present without pressure. One evening, wrapped in blankets on a bench overlooking the water, Clara spoke the fear she had been holding. I'm not who I was, she said. I don't want to build my life around someone anymore. Ethan turned toward her fully. I'm not asking you to, he said. I want to build beside you. The words settled inside her like a promise that didn't need embellishment. When he kissed her for the first time, it was slow. There was no claiming, no urgency. His lips met hers carefully, as if asking again whether she was certain. She responded not with hunger but with clarity, with choice. His hand rested at her waist, warm and grounding. Hers found his shoulder steady. The kiss deepened, not into intensity but intimacy, the kind that acknowledged history without being bound by it. When they parted, Ethan leaned his forehead against hers. Is this okay? He asked softly. Clara smiled. Yes, it really is. That night, as she lay in bed listening to the ocean, Clara realized something important. Love didn't demand she abandon her peace. It asked her to share it, and for the first time in years she felt ready to say yes. Love unfolded between them the way the tide returned to shore, consistently, without urgency, and impossible to mistake once it became part of the pattern. Clara noticed it first in the mornings. She would wake before her alarm, sunlight pale and tentative through the curtains, and reach automatically for her phone, not from habit but expectation. Some mornings there was a message from Ethan. Not declarations, not questions. Just presence. Morning, Clara. The water's calm today. Hope your day starts gently. She answered when she wanted to. Sometimes immediately. Sometimes later after coffee and quiet. He never commented either way. They settled into a rhythm that felt less like falling and more like arriving. Ethan cooked dinner at her house for the first time on a Wednesday evening. The windows were open, ocean air drifting in, and Clara sat at the counter while he worked. He asked where things were but didn't need direction. He paid attention, always had. You've changed this place, he said, glancing around as vegetables sautéed in the pan. It feels lived into. She smiled. It took time. So did you. The words rested warmly between them. They ate at the small wooden table, sharing easy conversation. Afterward, they lingered, talking about books they loved and music they never admitted to liking. There was laughter, soft, unforced. When Ethan reached across the table and took her hand, Clara didn't flinch. His thumb brushed over her knuckles slowly, absent-mindedly, like familiarity rediscovered. I like this, he said. How everything feels earned. She nodded. It does. Later on the sofa, they sat close enough that their shoulders touched. A lamp cast a warm glow, shadows gentle and forgiving. Ethan turned toward her, his expression open. Can I kiss you? He asked. The question mattered, not because she doubted the answer, but because he knew to ask. Yes, she said. This kiss was deeper than the first. Not hurried. Not cautious. It carried curiosity now, an exploration shaped by patience. His hand rested at the small of her back, steady and reassuring. Clara's fingers slid into his hair, the silver strands catching beneath her touch. There was warmth, closeness, breath shared in quiet rhythm. When he leaned back, Clara felt no disorientation, only a grounded warmth that lingered long after. Their nights together remained measured. They learned the comfort of lying side by side without expectation. Sometimes he stayed. Sometimes he left with a soft good night and a promise that didn't need to be spoken aloud. One evening, rain fell hard and sudden, drumming against the roof. Clara stood at the window watching it streak the glass when Ethan stepped behind her, arms wrapping gently around her waist. She leaned back into him instinctively. "This used to scare me," she admitted. "Letting someone close again." His chin rested on her shoulder. "Does it still?" She thought about the quiet she had protected for years, the solitude she had mistaken for safety. Then she thought about the way this felt, secure without confinement. "No," she said. "It doesn't." He kissed the curve of her neck softly once. No escalation, just closeness. That night they made love slowly, deliberately, like people who understood the intimacy of being chosen without urgency. Touch was unhurried. Communication lived in lingering glances and careful hands. There was reverence in it, not hunger. Afterward, wrapped in sheets and listening to rain fade into mist, Ethan traced slow patterns along her arm. "I don't want to rush the future," he said. "But I don't want to pretend I don't see one." Clara turned toward him, studying his face in the low light. "I see one too," she said. "I just want it to grow, not demand." "I can do that," he replied. "I want that too." Days turned into weeks. The marina neared completion. The town buzzed softly with anticipation. Clara attended meetings beside Ethan, their presence paired but independent. They supported each other without merging identities, a balance she cherished. One afternoon, Ethan joined her on a walk through the bluff trails. Wildflowers nodded in the breeze, color scattered against green. "This," Clara said, gesturing to the open space, "is where I come when I need to remember myself." Ethan slowed his pace. "Thank you for bringing me here." She took his hand, not tightly but deliberately. "I'm not afraid of losing myself anymore," she said. "Not with you." He squeezed her fingers gently. "I won't ask you to." As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Clara recognized something she hadn't expected. This love did not undo her life. It added to it. It filled pauses without erasing silence. It made room without taking space. It was love softly spoken, at midlife, when patience knew its value and choice meant more than certainty. And this time she listened. The morning the marina reopened, Briarwood Bay felt brighter, not because anything had changed overnight, but because people had something to gather around again. Clara arrived early, as she always did. The air was cool, softened by the salt that drifted in from the water. Banners fluttered gently along the docks, their colors muted and intentional, just like the rest of the design. Music played somewhere in the distance, low and inviting. She found Ethan near the end of the marina, standing alone for a moment before the town crowded in. He wore a quiet, focused expression, hands in his pockets, taking in the finished work. She walked to him without being asked. "You did well," she said. He turned, the tension in his shoulders easing when he saw her. "We did," he corrected. "This place was always still here. I just helped it breathe again." The ceremony came and went with simple words. No grand speeches, no dramatics. The ribbon was cut, applause echoed across the water, and people wandered the docks with appreciation and ease. Clara watched Ethan move among them, answering questions, listening more than he spoke. The man before her was not the one she'd loved years ago. Not diminished, not replaced, but refined. Rooted. Later, when the crowd thinned, they sat together on a weathered bench overlooking the bay. The water stretched endlessly ahead, calm under the wide sky. "I thought finishing this would feel like closure," Ethan said quietly. "Instead, it feels like space." Clara leaned into him, her hand resting against his thigh. "Not all endings are meant to close things," she said. "Some just make room." He turned toward her then, something earnest and steady in his gaze. "I want to stay," he said. "Here. With you." I don't want you to compromise anything you've built, Clara. I want to be part of it if you'll let me. The question was not rushed. It waited. Clara considered the life she had shaped with intention. The quiet mornings. The independent choices. The version of herself that no longer apologized for being whole. And she realized something with quiet certainty. Love was no longer asking her to give herself away. It was asking to stand beside her. Yes, she said. I want that. That evening, they returned to her house together. The windows glowed warmly against the dark, the porch light guiding them home. Dinner was simple. Conversation softer. Afterward, they settled on the porch swing beneath a sky scattered with stars, the ocean's rhythm steady in the distance. Ethan draped a blanket over their legs and kissed her slowly, deeply, without hesitation, without fear. There was comfort in it now. Assurance. Clara rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. It matched the calm within her. For so long she had believed peace and love asked for different things. Now she understood. Peace was choosing love without losing herself. And as the night wrapped around Briarwood Bay, Clara knew without doubt that her quiet heart had not been guarding itself all those years. It had been waiting. And finally it was home. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. Love softly spoken at midlife is a reminder that love doesn't end because time passes, and that choosing peace doesn't mean choosing solitude forever. Some loves return not to disturb the life you've built, but to walk beside it, slowly and without demand. If this story resonated with you, if it felt comforting, familiar, or quietly hopeful, then it was written for you. Stories like this are meant to be absorbed gently, like ocean waves at night or a conversation that lingers after the words stop. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video. It helps more listeners discover calm, heartfelt romances like this one. Share it with someone who appreciates slow-burn love stories and meaningful storytelling. And subscribe to the channel for more peaceful romance stories, gentle narration, and emotionally rich journeys. Your support allows these stories to continue finding their way to quiet hearts. Until next time, thank you for listening, and for believing in love that arrives softly.